Zoom. Can you all hear me in Zoom? You can give me a thumbs up or something. Oh
I
yeah,
can
thank
hear
you. Beautiful. I don't think you could hear me before. Sorry about that. I hate to say it, but this is actually a little low. I don't think that's ever happened before in my life. All right, welcome everybody in Zoom, and in the audience, we'll just give it like 1 more minute and then we'll get started. Joyce, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How's it going?
It's going so well. I missed the data science club, so I'm glad you're here at least.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Hello, Professor. Hi, Joyce. So great.
All right. Started. People join in. That's okay. Oh. All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. This is our next edition. I actually lost count of this academic year's number of data science speakers series presentations. And we are really excited to give you this presentation. So the three of us, and I'll let each person introduce themselves. The three of us gave this presentation at Howard University a couple weeks ago, and it was really fun. It was quite an engaging conversation. And so I want you to think of this presentation as more interactive than maybe some of the other presentations. So feel free once we give our presentations to, keep track of conversational topics, questions, whatever you want to, because we would love to give lots of time and energy towards that at the end of the presentations. So it's going to go in 3 parts. So we're going to be examining the key ethical implications in societal, environmental, and other issues, especially revolving around children with AI. So we're going to start with the ethical framework. Then we're going to discuss the early impacts of AI on children. And then we're going to consider environmental impacts with an emphasis on climate and environmental justice. Couple of assumptions that we're going to make with this audience. We're going to basically assume that you've heard of AI, so we're not going to call it artificial intelligence, which is what it is. And even machine learning, we can potentially even go to ML if we need to say that. The only other thing we might talk about briefly would be large language models, LLM, something like that. One thing we will not be discussing, though, are specific AI technologies. So we're not going on to any of the AI technologies in this talk. This is more just about impacts that we need to be concerned about. And so again, thank you for everyone who's joining. Thank you in Zoom. Thank you for coming out on a Friday. We really appreciate it. And again, just keep in mind, if you have questions, you can pop them in the chat at any point. I'll be monitoring when I'm not speaking, and we can kind of interrupt even if you feel like it. This is kind of how informal it will be. And so if you don't know me, which I think many of you do, my name is Rachel Seide, and I am professor in the Math Statistics and Data Science Department, and I'm the Data Science Program Director. And I am going to let Professor Alray take it away.
Thank you, Professor Saidi. Hello, everyone, and my name is Maysa Rai. I'm also a professor at the Math and the Data Science Department at Trackville. I'm also the Data Science Advisor, and thank you so much for being here. So without further ado, I would really appreciate if we get the conversation started. So if you can scan the QR code, please, so we can start an anonymous poll of only 3 questions that will help us figure out where we are at in terms of data ethics and privacy issues. Okay, let's do this. So hopefully you guys see the first question in your screen. Okay, so let's look at the first question. It says, if you found out that your neighbor had set up a camera on their window pointing at your house, recording every move and storing these videos, how would you feel about it? How would you respond? Very nice. Let's see the results. And as we would expect or suspect that the majority of us will feel uneasy, whether we actually report it to the authority or talk to that neighbor, but we would definitely feel uneasy with that behavior. Okay, keep those questions in mind because I'll revisit these questions as well once we start the presentation. So let's look at the second question. And the second question says, imagine that you sign up for a free fitness app that tracks your workout and health data. Later, you start noticing more ads for healthy foods and workout tips on your social media feed. Again, how would you feel about it? And we probably all have witnessed something similar to this, right? You don't even have to download the app. You can simply be walking in the supermarket and your phone camera catches this certain product and suddenly you see that ad in your phone. See the results. Okay, so again, while still this is just health tips and workout tips, most of us actually feel uneasy about the fact that somehow we're being recorded. Let's look at the last question. Your car insurance company offers a discount if you agree to install a tracking device in your car that monitor your driving behavior. Over time, you realize that the company is using this data to adjust your rates based on your driving habits. What would you do about the app? Okay, let's see the results. Okay, this question is very interesting. Every time I pose this question, I get the same results where we would feel uneasy about it and maybe delete the app, even though I've yet to hear a person saying that they are not, if not the best driver ever. So we still, and which is good because we are aware of our privacy and the need to protect it. So let's start I'm gonna go back to the slide. And let's go back all the way to Socrates. So Socrates talked about life. He mentioned that it's not just about life as much as the good life. So we human have been trying to make our life better and better, right? And we've been improving technology, improving so many aspects of life to keep our life safer, healthier, longer. And as we are doing so, we also need to protect ourselves and keep us safe, not only us, but the whole society. So we installed policies and laws. The reality is, in most of the cases, the wheel of technology has been faster than the wheel of law. And it basically, specifically with AI, it creates a huge gap between the law and the practice and the application. And within this gap, the only thing that governs our safety is honestly our ethics, specifically data ethics. So what is data ethics? Data ethics, let me try to move this. Yeah. So according to the US General Service Administration on data.gov, it says data ethics are the norms of behavior that promotes appropriate judgment and accountability when acquiring, so that's the first layer, managing, second, or using data with the goal of protecting civil liberties, minimizing risk to individuals and societies, and maximizing the public good. So throughout the slides, I'm going to go over 3 different scenarios that will touch every part of the data cycle: collecting data, processing data, and then using the findings of the data. So throughout these slides, I just need to make sure that I'm not representing any solution. I'm only shedding lights to keep the awareness alive when it comes to data ethics. So let's keep the first question in mind that I asked you about the creepy neighbor, and let's look at this scenario. We're all familiar with Amazon Ring, right? And Amazon Ring is basically an app plus a device that we can install and monitors the safety of the neighborhood. This is how it was promoted, and this is how it's used. The reality is that these videos that are taken without our consents are actually stored not only at the person's owner of the Ring, but also the Amazon cloud as well. And the Amazon Ring comes with 35 pages of manual, and of course, all of us read everything. In fact, in page 8, it states, in addition to the rights granted above, you also acknowledge and agree that Ring may access, use, reserve, and/or disclose your content to law enforcement authorities, government officials, and/or third parties, if legally required to do so, or if we have a good faith belief that such access, use, preservation, or disclosure is necessary. So not only that our images or our identity or our life or our property is recorded into that person's cloud account, it's also accessed by Amazon and a third party. In fact, any of us can be the third party, because Amazon Ring comes with an app called the Neighbors app, where you can actually watch what your neighbors have posted. And you don't have to own the Amazon to actually access the app. You can be any person and logging in and watching these videos. So now let's think of these third parties. In the best scenarios, these are third parties who are trying to promote technology. One of those technologies are facial recognition that are used heavily these days. Now, while facial recognition algorithm has been advancing and actually benefiting us, in reality, law enforcement uses them to pinpoint certain people in certain places. However, many studies have showed that these facial recognition have a very high error rates. In an article or in a study actually published by MIT called the Gender Shade, it states that the error rate for light-skinned men is 0.8% compared to 34.7% for darker-skinned women. So basically, 1 in every 3 women will be wrongly identified using this technology. Another study published by ACLU stated, and that study was done by the federal government, it stated that technology works best for a middle-aged white man, and the accuracy rates were not impressive when it comes to people of color, women, children, and elderly individuals. So basically 80% of the society. These algorithms are used and might harm certain people or certain demographic of the society. And these videos, keep in mind, these videos were collected, again, without any consent. No one, I did not sign for my video to be taken, and yet we all accept it because it is sold to us as a part of keeping us safe. So now if you go back to the first question and reevaluate having a creepy neighbor versus having Amazon Ring, the odds are going into probably the creepy neighbor. But so keep those questions in mind as we go forward. So now let's look at the second case. This is a case where data collection is checked. This is an app that is promoted by Allstate. It's called DriveWise, and basically this app can be installed to your car and monitor your speeding and driving behavior. In this app, obviously, you have consented to actually download it. You are aware, and you check the first layer of the data cycle. So Let's think of this hypothetical scenario. Let's say you are actually a good driver and you've been benefiting from it, your rates went down, and suddenly you get a job in a place where it has a higher risk of car theft, and suddenly your rates goes up. Now, from the insurance company point of view, this is actually needed. That's their agenda, to save money. From your point of view, the question, is it ethical? Is it legal? It's definitely legal. But then again, how aware were you with that data that is being processed? The third scenario and the last scenario is where the first part of data cycle, which is collection, was checked, processed was checked, but presentation not necessarily. So in this graph that you see over there, this is a graph that was published by the Florida law enforcement in 2014. They were trying to prove that a stand your ground law that was established in 2005 have actually decreased the death by gun in Florida. Now, just to give you a background of this law basically says that if you feel in danger, you can use your weapon to, in a good faith, and basically be not accountable for any results. I need you to look at the graph and tell me if you see anything off with this graph. The area is above the curve. Okay, good. There is a reason why the area is above the grid. Good catch. No, sir. It seems flipped. It is exactly flipped. Look at the y-axis. The y-axis actually goes from 800 to 0. And I have to give it to them. They actually kept it. So somehow they are a little bit honest. This is the real graph. And as you can see, between 2000 and a little bit more, there were actually an increase in the death. In fact, there were 300 human beings who were killed because of this law. So this is an example where data was collected accurately, it was processed correctly. However, it was published and manipulated in a way that serves people's agenda. So as you are thinking in the other scenarios that you'll be hearing today, you really have to think of how much are you responsible for collecting and using and processing data. Keep in mind that data itself is the only field that we are all part of. We are the consumer and we are the producer of these data. So what should we do? We should always keep in mind that these processes since we are part of it, we need to be accountable. So try to be in more events like this, shedding light into data ethics. Ask your company to actually invest in these conferences. Treat data as conditional good and be responsible for what you're posting, what you're using, what you're doing. And if you're going to data science field, I beg you to read the mission and the vision of the company that you will be working with. You want to make sure that you are actually serving humanity, not serving someone's agenda, especially when it comes to minor. And for that part, I will leave you to my friend Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the static electricity right there. Hello, everybody. Where's the clicker? Here we go. My name is Alex, and I am a proud alumnus of Montgomery College, and I'm here to talk to you today about the child-centered implications of AI and data and algorithms in general. But there's also somebody else I want to introduce you to today, somebody named Kai. She is a 5th grader in a public school in the United States. Here she is being portrayed by a local actress, and I would like us to walk through a day in her life. It begins at home in the morning. We're having, usually, this is where someone would have breakfast. Unfortunately for Kai, her state has developed a new algorithm to track whether people are participating in welfare fraud. So no more food stamps for Kai this month, and she's going to have breakfast at school. But that's all right, because Another thing the state has done is they have employed a local university to use machine learning to redraw the bus routes in her district. This results in her bus arriving almost an hour earlier. On the way to school, she borrows her friend's smartphone. You see, Kai's parents, they're kind of scared of this AI thing, so they don't really let her play with chatbots. So she uses her friend's phone. She goes onto a popular video social network, and she asks their local chatbot, you know, what should I do in my situation? And to the chatbot's credit, at first, it talks about having an honest and open conversation with her parents about how she can responsibly use AI. It then finished its recommendations with a method to hide the application from her parents if she so wishes to proceed that way. At school, Kai finally has breakfast, and little does she know that an algorithm has deemed out of her control that she will most likely not graduate from high school. So she is now labeled particularly in the system. On the way home, she looks up something that she learned about in school, eating disorders. And this is particularly important because of, you know, the breakfast thing. She goes to a national eating disorder organization that aims to battle this awful group of diseases. And they recently fired a bunch of their workers. They've been employing yet another chatbot. So she asked the chatbot a little bit about eating disorders and what she's been eating. And interestingly enough, what she got out of it was some dieting tips. So I don't know how that works. Back at home, she is enthralled in the algorithmic entertainment that she is receiving from social media, from her smartphone, from all that fun stuff. So her mom, of course, what does she do? She takes away her devices. Kai is sort of lost for what to do, so she asks her parents, let's call it a home assistant, what to do to pass her time. The home assistant combs through the internet and finds this new challenge that everybody's doing on social media. And in this challenge, you are tasked with taking an electronic device, partially plugging it into an outlet, and then touching the exposed prongs, the partially exposed prongs. So unfortunately, Kai on the homer. I'm just kidding. No, her mom was there and she stopped her before Kai got hurt or the house burned down. But this is important because we see even just today, the average child is being impacted by AI, data, and algorithms throughout their day, from the moment they wake up to the time they go to sleep. And this is particularly important. It's particularly important for us to look at children in a specific way when it comes to AI, because children are physically, socially, and psychologically different from us, which it seems kind of an obvious thing to say, but we have codified these sort of differences already in child labor laws, in pharmacological doses, in restrictions for advertising to children. So this is an inherently vulnerable population, and a study of this population can even give us insights as to adult relationships with AI. So what are the issues? The first one is privacy. We need to protect the data of children because, as I mentioned, they are an inherently vulnerable population. Their data is being collected throughout their day, and they are in a particularly powerless position. We can all feel powerless to the 36 pages of, or 56? 35 pages of terms of service and such. A child has even less power to protect themselves. So if we can employ guardrails, then we are more likely to see that privacy as a crucial protection of that child. Also, we need to look at how children are developing alongside these AI technologies. Chatbots, as currently developed, are exhibiting an empathy gap where they are not treating humans in the same way that we would like them to in an ethical manner, despite displaying a lot of the anthropomorphic expressions and politeness that we would expect from a fellow human being. And a child is going to have a more difficult time distinguishing between the ethical implications of the way an AI program works and the way a human being would react. Finally, we need to make sure that AI is not yet another method that the world is segregating and stratifying children with. So the access to AI needs to be widespread. It needs to be enabled in a more general youth population, and we cannot allow this technology to remain just in the hands of more privileged school districts and only in the hands of children who have the availability of the technology. Only 75% of school districts have the internet connectivity to actually maintain digital education. So what can we do? Well, the number one thing will be regulation, because this is how we can get the companies that are creating this technology to follow the guardrails that we need to protect the children that are so impacted by these technologies. Advocacy is also important, of course. Education is a big part of that. The United States is a little bit behind the rest of the world in this. We have a patchwork of AI policies across the different state education departments. Some are more equipped than others. The state of Maryland has just begun last year to look into AI's impact on education and children and adolescents. But when you look at the parties involved in educating the legislature and creating these studies, you see a lot of the companies that are very much creating these technologies, which they absolutely have a right and absolutely should be involved in the process. However, I think we need to keep that in mind when we're trying to balance out the scales of, are we making sure legislators are hearing from us as much as they're hearing from the Googles and the Metas and all those fun friends. And finally, we need to remain curious. We need to demand accountability of all these companies. We need to ask them what they are why 35 pages. We need to support research that targets children. Like I said, that research might even provide insights that are expandable to adults. And we need to just always be asking questions, always staying informed. Some of the questions that we should be asking are, how do we keep kids safe even when they're using technology that is not intended for them? I'm sure we all know many services that say, you need to be 13 years old, you need to be 18 years old, and we cannot allow companies to just stay behind that as a defense for not creating systems that are protecting children. We need to be realistic about what children are actually using, not what they're allowed to use, but the reality of where their attention is going. And we also need to think about how we incorporate the perspectives of children and the voices of children when we are deciding how to cope with AI's place in the world. Now, one last creature I would like to introduce you to is Kai's namesake. Kai is actually named after a robot toy. This is an artificial intelligence robot that was released in 2023 by a joint United States, United Kingdom company. And it's marketed for children ages 10 and above if they have help, and 12 if they got this, whatever that means. And the purpose of this toy is to teach children the principles of machine learning. Now, the way it does this is it uses an app on your smartphone to teach the robot various gestures. So you wave your hand at your smartphone screen, and then the robot will perform certain actions. Now, this is the terms of service that comes with the app for this toy. I could not fit it in one slide, so I had to make it 2 slides. And we already heard today about the ethical implications of what it means to agree to something like this. I think it's important to remember that when a child busts open this toy, after their favorite holiday, after their birthday, and they're hit with this, they're not doing anything. Neither is their parent going to stop them and be like, you know what? No, hold up. We've got to do some reading first. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to realistically read through this. And perhaps we need to demand more from these companies so that the onus isn't completely on us. So keep this in mind when you're shopping for the children in your life as these toys hit the market more and more. Maybe even look up the apps ahead of time if you're purchasing a toy. So this picture right here was drawn by a member of something called the Children's Parliament in Scotland, and they did a study where they spoke to a bunch of children about AI and their thoughts and feelings. And this is a card that says, how will AI affect the role of a teacher? And I wanted to end on this picture because it really demonstrates that children, they have very similar concerns to us, down to, are we going to lose our jobs sort of thing. Like, they are in tune with their needs, they're in tune with the world, and we need to respect that. We need to protect them explicitly so that they don't implicitly get left behind. And another thing we need to do is we need to make sure we have a world left behind for them. And on that note, I'm going to pass it on.
All right, so the last piece, the last segment that we're going to talk about, we're looking at environmental impacts of AI. I think people think about some environmental impacts, but I think some of the things I'm going to reveal to you may be things you may not have thought about. So for example, we're going to talk about sources, which many of them you will have thought of and others you may not have. I would like to focus on the implications on marginalized communities in particular, and then maybe some solutions. So the first thing I want to look at is, I'm a math professor, so by the numbers. I wanted to go through a lot of the numbers here. So I don't have a laser pointer. I don't think this is a fancy laser pointer, but if we look on the, I'll go through and we'll start on the kind of, we'll go left to rightish and we'll move up and down. Because some of these are flooring, or jarring, I should say. So AI's computational power is projected to double every 100 days, increasing global energy demand attributed to AI by 26% to 36% annually in the coming years. If I go down to the bottom, US data centers, remember the data centers are when you are trying to train models, you need to have lots and lots of data. So the data is stored in what's called a data center. And what are these data centers? Just massive area, massive, you can think of as giant supercomputers. They went from a total electrical consumption of 1.9% in 2018 to 4.4% in 2023, but then look at the prediction. So between 7 and 12% in 2028. So in only 3 years. If I continue a little bit up to the top, Microsoft alone intends to spend $80 billion on AI data centers. That was from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. If I go back down, Google's US data centers alone consumed an estimated, this one may surprise you, 12.7 billion liters of fresh water. Most people don't connect water use with AI, and we'll get into that more later. If I go up again, the request made through okay, this one's important because lots of people are used to using ChatGPT. One request through ChatGPT consumes 10 times the electricity of a Google search. We'll talk about why, maybe. Between 25% and 40% of power demand in data centers is used for cooling to maintain optimal performance, depending on climate and technology. And then this one, the incremental US power demand from data centers is predicted to be between 150 to 250 terawatt hours between 2024 and 2030. And very in the bottom, if you don't know what a terawatt hour is, a terawatt hour is equal to a trillion watt hours, 10 to the power 12, which is kind of crazy. So again, some of these sources you may have thought of, so these you may not have. So for example, if we look at number one, fossil fuel combustion, we often are hearing about greenhouse gases, particulate matter, so pollutants in the air. They cause respiratory issues, things like that. They can cause acid rain. And then extraction. So when you're mining for the minerals that are important to making these data centers and all the software, it can disrupt ecosystems, contribute to the environmental degradation. So if we talk about, let's get into some of the particular things like cobalt, silicon, gold, many of these metals, the mining can lead to soil erosion and pollution. And then think on the back end. In a lot of countries, there is what they call cradle to grave consideration of products. That means that you think about the start to finish of where this product ends, but we don't necessarily have any regulation on that. So if you have any sort of products, you create them, then at the end of its life, where does it go? And so we have all this electronics and minerals that are now electronic waste. The water issues, again, a lot of people don't think about this. So a lot of these massive data centers need to be cooled because they get hot. So they're using water running through them to keep them cool. And then the water goes out and it's now heated. So it's thermal pollution that can affect a lot of the ecosystem. You can even just deplete the local freshwater. A lot of the data centers happen to be in very warm areas that are already needy of water. There are even some water wars. Water consumption rate for data center heat rejection is disproportionately higher, as I said, in drought-stricken regions. Think about like Arizona. There's a lot of data centers being built in a lot of these very hot areas that already have their own water problems. And then agriculture, this one, it was one that when I was researching this, I hadn't thought of. So AI algorithms can cause overuse of pesticides. So for example, if you are training the AI system to optimize the yield, the maximize how much crop yield you're getting, then it may suggest that you need to increase or even overuse the pesticides and fertilizers, right? And so that's going to over-contaminate the soil, the water, harming the biodiversity. So depends on the perspective of what optimization means, right? And so who is training it is making big difference. AI algorithms can also cause increased yields at the expense of maintaining these ecosystems. You can get these monocultures. So again, it depends on who is the perspective that's training these things that can cause a lot of these kind of degradation. Oh, I don't need that. Okay. Now let's get into environmental justice. So environmental justice has been, something that is especially marginalizing communities for forever. This one was just last month. So this was very recently in the news, and I know we're all following a lot of these explosion of changes, but EPA workers who assist heavily with polluted communities are put on leave. We've heard plenty of these things right now. So right now, the fact that a lot of the workers who are protecting marginalized communities are now losing their jobs and they can't protect them anymore. So climate and environmental justice, otherwise known as CEJ, is often a disproportionate burden on communities that are particularly vulnerable to resulting in environmental harms. I have a picture off on the right. If you notice, you may have heard of some nuclear power plants that are now being opened. There's 3 Mile Island up that was, closed down many, many years ago. Now they're trying to reopen that. There's a new one here for South Carolina. They're seeking buyers now because why? Because they need to have more energy for these data centers for all the energy we're using with AI. So if you look at the bottom quote, it says that data centers are so power hungry that some will have to be less fussy and they're going to pick more dirty types of energy sources because that's all they have available. So nuclear, natural gas, may even be going back to coal, who knows? I'm going to take this quote here. So climate justice is a measured meditation on our obligations to one another in a warming world, and a reminder that among all its other dizzying and distressing features, global warming is a red-hot problem for moral philosophy, asking us who counts and who doesn't. And the way I like to think of this is that, as some of the other presenters have talked about, the leaders of the Metas and the Facebooks and all of those, these people at the top, there is some win, but there's also it's a zero-sum game, because when somebody's winning, then somebody is being harmed. That is always the case. And so the question is, who is being harmed as there is this race for the top? So without justice guiding policy creation, then the question is the repercussions on AI environment will depend on societal choices. What do we decide? What are we deciding what we want for our society? And again, governments are racing to the top. Like the United States is competing with China, is competing with all these different countries to get to the top, but rarely do they take the environment and sustainability into account. And so without these guardrails, it's no less dangerous than any of the other guardrails that are potential harms. So I have 15 solutions, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I am going to highlight some of them. I'd like to highlight at least starting with number 5. So encourage companies to green their data centers, including using renewable energy and offsetting their carbon emissions. I will leave those. And the reason I'm going to not read all of them is because if you came in late at the very start, we had a QR code for the slides, and we'll go back at the end if you wanted to look at the slides. Number 11, new cooling technologies and sites that can perform more computations when power is cheaper, more available and more sustainable are being explored, potentially. I like number 10. So companies like NVIDIA that makes these special chips is now claiming that they have a new super chip that apparently will deliver 30 times the performance while using 25% less energy. We'll see. Number 12, and this is one I want participation from the audience. I want to know how many people have heard of dark data. Anybody? Okay, I love this. So dark data is if you think about it, if you're holding your phone and then you send all sorts of pictures to the cloud, And then you delete some of them off your phone, but you keep sending them off to the cloud. Anything that's stored in the cloud, especially if you're never using it again, that's dark data. It's still taking up energy. So dark data is one of the biggest abusers of that, in addition to the AI itself. So I know that we're talking all about the onus on the individual again, but the individual thinking about dark data, and that also needs to be a consideration. I personally haven't cleaned all my dark data, but it's at least something to be aware of. And then the last one I'll do is number 13, transform the energy efficiency of other carbon intensive industries. So basically using AI for good for the predictive analytics. And then I personally have put out lots and lots of references for what I was exploring in case anybody would like them. This is the end of the presentation, and I know most of you know how to find us. So instead, what I wanted to do is just go back to the beginning. I know you get to see all the good stuff, especially if you came late, just in reverse. And there, if you'd like the QR code, this is the link directly to these slides in case you wanted to look up any of the resources that we have here. But then after that, what I did want to do is open it up to see if there are any questions or comments or topics of conversation that you wanted to add to this discussion. Yeah, Nasser. You have to do the microphone so the people in Zoom can hear you. Sorry.
Hello. I had so many comments, I probably forgot a lot of them, but around the beginning, there was something that was said about these technologies that we create. Yeah, it's on. I don't speak too loud. Yeah, it's on. Yeah, can you hear me? So I don't know if it's a problem that I realized is that eventually, as we have created AI or we're in the process of perfecting it, it mirrors our behaviors. In that sense, it mirrors the good and the bad, the biases, everything is going to be in there. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to avoid eventually comes back to us. And I didn't realize that down the line that there are, kids that are going to be using AI now. And that's quite a dangerous thing because it's going to isolate a lot of children because they're going to get on these chatbots. They're not going to look at it from the point of, okay, this is how a machine is trained. It's going to be what the companies are selling them. These chatbots are going to be representing people, characters in video games. And, reading some of the books from data science and behind these chatbots, a lot of people are not using them. I mean, I don't really know how AI should be used, but they're not using them in a way that chatbots should be used. The the questions they ask, the requests they ask, it's not a human you're talking to. If you tell a chatbot to create a weapon for you or to filter data, but then to add in the fact that, there's a religious belief that this or that, immediately the whole thing is ruined. The data is fed back, it's used to retrain. And then eventually along the line, if you don't put self-correcting mechanisms, you have this superpower that's just everywhere. I don't want to drone on, but that's just one of the things that, and we can't really avoid it. No matter what, I mean, we can't per se give monkeys our data to create a chatbot for us and say, okay, maybe their beliefs or their practices are going to be favorable. We're the only ones that can, as of right now, create these technologies, so they will mirror our behaviors and. I don't know, might just be me, but I don't trust human uh human choices 100%. I mean, just look at history. Just
I think what you're alluding to is the fact that capitalism seems to be the bottom line here, right? Why would we trust it when the only reason for winning is making more money and making more money off of people, right? So there are great uses of AI. I would fully agree that there are plenty, but what we're talking about right now exactly is these concerns that we're creating these feedback loops where we're training the data on the same, the data is on the data is on the data, and we're creating, which you've heard me talk about, the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. And so we're not really creating anything new. In fact, we're narrowing the world of understanding as well, I think. Yeah. There was something in the chat. There are a couple in the chat. And do you
I'll
wanna
read it out. I have it. So this is about dark data. Is the solution to save that data onto an external hard drive? Does the downloading process create an energy consumption issue?
Ooh, I am not an expert on dark data. I wish I was, actually. It's a wonderful question. So there are a couple reasons that you may want to download to an external hard drive because A, where is the cloud? Who owns that cloud? And what are they doing with your pictures, your data, whatever? So that would be my first question in general. And so an external hard drive would be great as long as you have a backup to your backup so the external hard drive doesn't die and you lose everything, right? So I don't know what the solution is, but yeah, that dark data, I mean, I would like to see the data on how much dark data is out there taking up space in a lot of these data centers. I guess that would be my next exploration. But I think it's really important because as who is, sorry, I missed who this-
Michelle.
Michelle, so thanks for asking that question. I don't know the answer, but I think it's worth all of us exploring something more. Great question. Was there another one?
Joshua was wondering, how can dark data be accessed?
Oh, well, you can always access your own data, which is if you have a cloud or a Dropbox or wherever your data is stored, right? And so it's just the cloud, but it's only your own. Now, the question is, I don't know if I'm interpreting this wrong, Joshua, but can somebody else? And I would imagine any of the owners, for example, if you have an iCloud, then I imagine Apple certainly has access to all of your dark data. And Mace, you want to?
I just want to also add, the personal part, exactly, you can have access to it, but you also want to think if that data was already stored in the cloud. So for example, in the 30 pages of Amazon that I actually read after preparing for the presentation. No, it just says that once you actually delete the account with Amazon Ring, you don't have the ownership to these videos. In fact, if you want to access these videos, you need a court order and you could be denied. So even accessing the dark data that you actually uploaded with the hope of protecting the neighborhood, still you don't have an option to access those as well.
Yeah, and going back to that dark data, so for example, let's say you have home security, maybe not even just like the Amazon Ring, but you've got cameras around your house and they're 24/7, right? And so now you've got maybe in your house movement, you've got on the exterior of your house movement, all those videos, they're going somewhere. And videos take up, as we all know, tons and tons of space. So that is some massive dark data right there. So the question would be maybe for Michelle, to your point, maybe putting that into an external hard drive that immediately maybe deletes after a couple of months, that would be a much better use of the storage as a potential. Yeah, and also then it's also not going potentially to other countries that might be taking your data with your video feeds. Did you want to add something, Alexa? Love those questions. If any other questions before we end this conversation for today? Or I guess we just we pause the conversation, but I think this just is a starting point to think about all these things some more. If not, then thank you so much, everyone in Zoom. Thank you. I am grateful for your attendance, and thanks again for everyone here who came in person. We are so grateful for all of your participation, and hopefully we'll have at least one more data science speaker series this semester. And I wish you all a wonderful spring break in another week. So take care. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, professors.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.